Kid Icarus isn't exactly one of Nintendo's most popular franchises, and as a result, the series lacks on entries. And if it hadn't been for Smash Bros, I'm sure Pit would still be stuck in the past. Kid Icarus was sort of abandoned, and looking back at the 8-bit and 16-bit era, the likes of Link and Samus were chosen above Pit to represent Nintendo's brand. However, things could have taken a drastically different turn for Pit if Nintendo had developed the sequel to the NES original. Rumor has it such a game was in development, and it was known as Super Kid Icarus. The story of Super Kid Icarus starts out as nothing more than this small blurb cut from an old video game magazine, which simply states that a big and long-awaited SNES Kid Icarus game is in the works. And that's it. What you're looking at here is the most famous evidence of this game's existence, and is most commonly passed around when people reference the game online. This is ironic because it gives almost no information about the game itself, and most people don't even know where this information came from to begin with. It's sort of just been accepted as proof that Super Kid Icarus existed, with no one else online being able to tell you any more than that. Of course, this information is hardly a drop in the bucket in trying to understand what Super Kid Icarus really was, or if this information is even legit. To uncover the details regarding this mysterious game, I wanted to figure out what magazine this write-up came from to give myself a better idea of its context. As I said earlier, this image is widely circulated and gets passed around a lot, so I was thinking a reverse image search would pull up many additional web pages that discuss it. And it did. There was one great thread among the rest, a topic from the classic Lost Levels forum, which specifically discusses Super Kid Icarus itself. According to a user named Celine, the famous blurb originates from a gaming magazine called Game Fan and appears in Volume 4, Issue 3. I found a scan of the magazine online and confirmed this was indeed true. The information comes via the Other Stuff section of the magazine, which looks like a random grab bag section of news. This edition is from March 1996, with the Super Kid Icarus info being part of an E3 lineup section. While no other information outside of that blurb is discussed, something strikes me as a bit odd. The game was claimed to have been long awaited, but how could it have been so anticipated if this 1996 magazine is seemingly the only time and place it was mentioned? I suspect there must be older evidence out there that at least mentions the game. We need to look a little further back in time to get our answer to that question. Among the scarce resources talking about Super Kid Icarus online, the Lost Games Wiki is another site of note that pops up when you search the topic. Their article is pretty empty to say the least, and they feature that same Game Fan blurb as their leading image for the page. However, you'll notice that there are a couple more blurbs taken from different magazines that give us a lot more information about the game than we've already uncovered. The first one is from a UK exclusive magazine called Superplay, which was published for the duration of the SNES's life from 1992 to 1996. The mention of Super Kid Icarus this time comes from a column titled Daydreaming, where viewers talk about games they wish existed. Well, by coincidence or not, one reader wrote in wishing that a Kid Icarus game existed on the Super Nintendo, to which the editor replied, "A SNES Kid Icarus game will be unveiled at either the Summer CES in June or the Winter CES next January. The game isn't set to be released until early 1995 though." That's pretty shocking to hear all at once. A planned reveal date and possibly release information? What's even more shocking about all of this is the fact that this issue of Superplay was published in June 1994, nearly 2 years before the Game Fan blurb in 1996. While the game was obviously not revealed or released according to Superplay's timeline, at the very least we do know 2 years of possible development time had passed in between these magazines mentioning the game. And that's crazy. However, things get even weirder when I discovered we can go back even further than this, to what I believe is the earliest evidence of this game's existence online. The second magazine blurb from Lost Games Wiki comes from an Italian publication called Game Power. The write-up itself is in Italian, but when translated it reads, "In about a year we should see the SNES release of one of the best games that ever appeared on the NES, Kid Icarus. With a good 24 megabits, it promises to be one of the most massive titles of the year, or at least that's what Nintendo claims, even though we haven't seen anything from it." The year of this magazine's publication is February 1994, 4 months before Superplay even mentioned it. While this information is extremely interesting, it ultimately doesn't change what we know about the game. How could this game have been in the public eye for so long and get hyped up this much, yet constantly miss deadlines and never get so much as a screenshot? That tone essentially never changes, even as late as our GameFan source from 1996. This means from 1994 to 1996, the game was claimed to exist even though it never made an appearance. Before my research, I was a bit skeptical about it being real at all, considering the only source I knew of was that famous blurb from GameFan, and even now I'm thinking it could have just been a rumor that ultimately had no substance behind it. Still, I wanted to believe it really did exist in some form, in some way. This brings us to our final magazine source, and perhaps the most recognized out of all the ones mentioned so far. If we go back to the Lost Levels forum, OP started the thread in the first place because of another forum post he found while trying to do research of his own. It mentions an issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly from 1995 or 1996, where Super Kid Icarus was allegedly discussed by a staff writer named Quarterman. He claimed that Super Kid Icarus and another SNES game were very far in development before they were dropped in favor of moving the company's resources to the N64. Further noting that Star Fox 2 was a well-known example of this shift in focus. This makes a lot of sense. There's no way Nintendo would have bothered developing and releasing a sequel to a less popular franchise on outdated hardware. There's only one problem with this story. It's fake. With Electronic Gaming Monthly being an established magazine, a staff member's name connected to the story, and the publishing date being later on in the timeline, I was thinking that this was the most concrete proof we had of the game existing. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. I did a little bit of looking into who Quarterman was, and all the top articles I found were compilations of his fake rumors. There was one article in particular that said as magazine printing deadlines came up, the staff would create fake rumors simply to fill pages and get them done on time. While some stuff Quarterman wrote about in the magazine did end up being real or partially true, a lot of it was fake, and I'm sure his Super Kid Icarus claim was an extension of that. As I discussed earlier with the unverified nature of the game, Quarterman probably heard about it from the other staff members who heard it from other magazines sourced in this video. To be fair, I don't have the original Quarterman article, so I don't know if this was actually speculation or straight up fakery. No matter the case, his story on its own can't be believed, and again, it's looking more and more like the Italian magazine was the origin of it all. In fact, back in the day, it was pretty common for foreign magazines to make up false claims for the sake of being topical or interesting. Since an Italian magazine was the origin, perhaps it spread among gaming circles over the years and became something no one questioned or looked into. And considering Nintendo never once acknowledged the game for the duration of its existence, I'm gonna say this was just a rumor that got way out of control, meaning Super Kid Icarus was never actually a real game. There's just not enough proof to suggest it ever existed. This is a really disappointing conclusion to have reached here. I was really hoping to uncover a lost Kid Icarus game that would eventually be unearthed and change what we know about the franchise. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. This brings up an even bigger talking point about gaming journalism in the 90s. I didn't grow up with these magazines, so maybe I'm just naive, but man, I can't believe writers were okay with printing straight up fake news. I thought more about the other rumors I've covered on the channel before, like Mario's Castle and the Purple Yoshi tech demo, and concluded that those games are probably fake too. The Purple Yoshi was IGN's creation just to bring people to their forums, as that's where the image was hosted, and Mario's Castle was another fake game Electronic Gaming Monthly created to hype up Project Atlantis, since I've never seen the game mentioned outside of this magazine. Maybe someday we'll discover a real lost retro Kid Icarus game, but for now we can put the rumor to rest that Super Kid Icarus does not exist, and that gaming magazines from the 90s should not be taken at face value.